Roger Wallace is the sports director at KXAN in Austin, Texas, and color analyst for the Longhorn Football Radio Network. He joins BYU Sports Nation right now. Roger, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Okay, Roger, Malcolm Brown and Jonathan Gray, talented Texas duo of running backs, both named to the Doak Walker Award watch list. Jamal Williams, BYU, also on that list. They'll face off on September 6th. My question for you is, should the committee make an exception with the quarterback Taysom Hill and add him to the list?
I'm sure Texas would vote for him, with their eyes closed after what happened last year. But I heard your poll question. Yeah, I think down here they would all vote for Taysom Hill as the number one rusher for BYU. But that will be a point of emphasis when the Cougars roll into Austin this fall, no doubt.
Given what happened in Provo last year, do Texas fans have the BYU game circled as that payback game?
Well, in a strange way, guys, I mean, that was the catalyst for a lot of change. So I'm not going to say that they thought that needed to happen for the change, but I think they're more concerned with you got UCLA up in Arlington at Cowboy Stadium, AT&T Stadium, and of course they've got a tough Big 12 schedule right off the bat. So I think when that game rolls around, it will be. But quite honestly, I think they're looking at UCLA as their top non-conference game. No slight to BYU, but
sure.
Really going to be a top 10 team.
Yeah, it looks like a trap game on paper to me if I look at it as a Texas observer, because UCLA is the next week in Arlington, in Jerry's World, if I'm not mistaken. So BYU on September 6th, the Cougars. That's the game BYU fans are looking forward to the most, I think, this year is at Texas. What an opportunity. The last time, 2011, one-point game that BYU fell in. What do you expect to happen on September 6th in Austin?
Well, there's so many question marks, guys, and one question mark is something that just popped up this week with Texas players having a meal with an agent. Allegedly, two of them had the meal paid for. And if there are suspensions and it goes beyond that opener against North Texas, then obviously that could be a big hit for the Texas defense if any of the four guys are suspended for the BYU game. The other question mark, you talked about Jonathan Gray and Malcolm Brown on the Doak Walker list. Is Jonathan Gray healthy? I think they like what Malcolm Brown can do, but they'd rather have that two-headed monster. And then, of course, the biggest question is quarterback. And, David Ash played pretty well out at BYU until he got his bell rung. And, he hit a couple of big touchdowns, and Texas actually had the lead before the Avalanche. So there's so many question marks that I can't give you an honest answer right now because I don't know what Texas is going to look like then.
And then when will you? Because North Texas is the first game, and that will tell you something, but not a ton, right? So BYU is maybe the first revealing game for Texas football.
Yeah, and I think North Texas, the only reason I say it'll tell you a lot is because nobody has any clue what to expect with Charlie Strong as the head coach. So much talk about, toughness and this and that, but what will it look like? That's kind of a hard thing to redefine in such a short amount of time. My guess is they're not going to look drastically different than they have. It's going to be more of a slow process with Charlie Strong and his staff putting the stamp on this team. But the key is the quarterback. Even if those guys are out for a game or two suspension-wise, I think defensively they're pretty solid. They're pretty deep. But if David Ash isn't healthy, then it's a toss of a coin. You've got Tyrone Swoops, who's a sophomore who played very little last year and virtually no meaningful snaps. And then the true freshman, Gerard Hurd, who comes in with a lot of height, but, a true freshman.
Right now, how is David Ash's health?
Well, from what we hear, and that's all we do is, we hear the chatter that 7-on-7's going fine. The head injury is what kept him out of most of last season, but then he broke a bone in his foot that kept him out of the second half of spring practice, which obviously he was cleared with all the concussion symptoms. So you have to assume that that's fine because he certainly hasn't been hit since then. And I guess the foot is okay because he's going through all the summer drills, but we don't have a whole lot of access, but I'm going to assume he's okay. The question is he hasn't stayed healthy throughout a season. Last year, and the games he played in, he was productive. He couldn't finish a game, though.
Yeah, we know he's a capable player. In fact, I thought that he was probably the best quarterback that BYU faced all of last year, just looking at the raw talent. Talking with Roger Wallace, sports director at KXAN in Austin, Texas, color analyst for the Longhorn Football Radio Network on BYU Sports Nation. You talked a little about Charlie Strong. We have a few questions, I guess, in regard to him taking over the program. What are the biggest differences that you've seen as you follow this team between Mack Brown's approach and now Charlie Strong's approach?
Well, Charlie Strong's approach is pretty clear. It's all about the players. He will do what he has to do outside of those responsibilities, and I won't say he does it reluctantly, but he does it with his own style, his own very basic, this is the way it is. The message is pretty much the same. He doesn't color it up with a lot of great anecdotes and stories and things like that. But he is about the players, and that's what we heard from the people at Louisville. That's the exact same approach there. He is a guy that is going to be tough on his players, but that's really all he cares about. He wants his players to hang out at the facility. He wants them to be around the coaches as much as they can. Everything else he does is because he has to.
Charlie Strong came out and said, you know what, we're probably not going to win the national championship this year, stuff like that. What are the expectations in year one coming off of an 8-win or a 9-win season?
Well, it's funny. It's kind of I think it's kind of a stair-step thing. First, everyone wants to see what this team's going to look like, and again, I would caution Texas fans, they're going to run out there and they're going to have the same uniforms, and by and large, they're going to look relatively the same with some new faces. But I think what people want to see is a little edge, a little nasty, and that toughness. And Mack Brown got a bad rap, guy. When they were really good, they were a tough team. They were a nasty team. That 2005 team that won the national title, that was a nasty team. But because Mack Brown is the way he is, the way he handled the media, the way he, had sometimes protected his players with the media, he got that reputation as a soft coach. And so that stuck, and you just can't shed that label. So Charlie Strong's not going to get the reputation because of the stuff he does away from the field. And so I think people just want to see kind of a nasty edge, and they want to see their team walk into the stadium and be the baddest team in the stadium. And the ironic part is they did it against the one opponent that Mack Brown couldn't get a handle on in his 16 years consistently, and that was Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And the way they beat Oklahoma is they were the nastiest team at the line of scrimmage, offensive and defensive, and the game was not as close as the score, believe it or not, and they've been on the wrong end of so many of those. So that's kind of the odd part about last season is what they did to OU, but no one can get BYU out of their head, and that black cloud, I think everyone was thinking, man, if only that storm had just, flooded Provo and they had to call the game, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah, BYU had the week before at Virginia had a similar situation and lost that game. Even in Week 12 last year, Texas had a chance to win the Big 12, which was still interesting. But when you look at the expectation this year, is there a perceived kind of cut line with a win total that would be acceptable in year one under Charlie Strong?
Yeah, I think as long as they stay on that 7, 8, 9, 7 would probably you'd get some grumbles, especially if Ash is healthy, because then that's 7 and 5. That's a depending on what they do in the non-conference. Now, as you guys mentioned, you got 3 non-conference games. North Texas comes in; they won 9 games, and they're picked to win their division in Conference USA. So I think everyone fully expects Texas to win that game. But then you've got BYU and UCLA, so they could go 1 and 2 in the conference, and then everything kind of changes going into the 9-game Big 12. But I would think 7 minimum. If they don't get to 7, then it's not going to be pretty right off the bat.
Do fans like Charlie Strong across Longhorn Nation and in Austin?
Well, I think the ones that wanted to change like the fact that there's a change. And so, Mack Brown was quick to point out that he goes, I'm not the celebrity. The head coach of Texas is the celebrity. So they'll love Charlie Strong as long as he gets it done, and I don't think they care about that other stuff. The people that might care are the ones that want to be in that inner circle, and the money people that like to be a part of the program, and really caused such a fracture with this program. And there's a big reason why Mack Brown's not there is because it became a program divided, and a lot of it were the money people. The fans I don't think they care about a likable coach as much as a coach that gets results and gets the results the right way. It's the ones that like to, take the coach to lunch and be at the luncheons and things like that might have a problem regardless of the results if they aren't one of Charlie Strong's guys. And from what I hear, just in the short time he's been here, you're not going to crack that inner circle just because you're a Texas guy with a lot of money.
Roger Wallace, color analyst and of the Longhorn Radio Network, sports director and anchor at KXAN. You can follow him on Twitter at rwallacekxan. Okay, Roger, I want to know if when you look at this BYU team, and you mentioned that you're focused on UCLA, is this an opportunity for BYU, I guess, to prove that they belong in the Big 12? Do you see this game against Texas as, hey, here's another statement for the Cougars to come in and say, you know what, the Big 12 should really consider BYU as a legitimate player in the discussion of who gets to join the conference?
Well, if they're going to expand, then I'll give you a yes and a no. Yes, obviously they would be looking for a program that gives them that kind of footprint in a part of the country they don't already have. And then the no would be Texas fans would just say, we're not there yet. We got beat by BYU, and they're narrow-sided enough not to worry about the big picture. But I would say, if the Big 12 is going to expand.
It sounds like we lost Roger. He's on his way to Lubbock, Texas on a college road trip with his daughter. And so I figured we were bound to lose him at some point traveling through West Texas.